I'm going to be talking today about the mirror and how the mirror relates to the work we do around hate crime. So the mirror is an object that we all use in everyday life. It's something that we use to look at ourselves, to check our appearance before we go out and embrace the outside world. I don't know about you, but for me, it does form part of my daily routine. As soon as before I leave my house, I check myself in the mirror. When I arrive somewhere, I just have a little look to make sure my hair's looking okay, and it forms that part of our daily routine. So a mirror is an object that gives a reflection of who we are. But what if, to others, they view us differently to how we see ourselves? What if to others, the way we look, our appearance, is something that they don't like? What if to others, who we are is actually the object of hate? So when somebody expresses hatred, hostility towards someone because of who they are, then this is a hate crime. So hate crimes are acts of verbal abuse, intimidation, harassment, violence that are targeted towards someone deliberately on the basis of their actual or perceived identity. So although hate crime is now more widely recognised as a significant social problem, there's still so much that we don't fully understand, that the impact that this has on people if they are targeted for who they are. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about the Leicester Hate Crime project and explain how this relates to how we see ourselves, to that important daily routine of looking at yourself in the mirror and being comfortable with who you are. So the Leicester Hate Crime project started in September 2012 and we only finished last month. And we wanted to examine the experiences of people who'd been targeted because of their identity, because of their vulnerability or perceived difference. And we had three main aims, as you can see here, to discover as much as possible about people's experiences of hate, prejudice and targeted hostility. To understand the physical and emotional harms suffered by victims and their families, and to identify the ways of improving the quality of support offered to victims. So the Leicester Hate Crime project was a bit different to previous studies around hate crime. So in the past, hate crime research tends to look at the 5 monitored strands of identity that we have in the UK. So we have legislation around race, religion, sexuality, disability and transgender status. But there's a lot we don't know about other groups. Those groups who are more marginalised, those groups whose experiences are often overlooked, and to some extent even ignored. So as well as looking at those more recognised victims groups, we wanted to make sure that we were hearing from gypsies and travellers, asylum seekers and refugees, people who belong to alternative subcultures like emos, rockers, punks, people who are homeless or who have mental ill health. So I've just got a bit of an image here to show you. So in the last 2 years, we asked this question, have you ever been victimised for who you are? And we heard from people who've been victimised for their age. Again, targeted on the basis of the way they look, the way that they're perceived because of their age, because of their body shape, because of their alternative style, their traveller status, their religion, their beliefs, my class, my physical disability, my learning disability, my gender. So as well as capturing this diversity that exists within victim groups, we wanted to make sure we captured the diversity of experience. It's actually normally those headline-grabbing forms of hate crime, like violent attacks, that we know about, that we hear about. But actually, people are targeted because of the way they look, day in, day out, through online abuse, through text messages, through hate mail, through being bullied, by having their house, their car, their property vandalised, having graffiti spray painted over their house. So we started out 2 years ago with this ginormous hope of speaking to as many people as possible in capturing diverse range of experience. And over the last 2 years, we heard from 1,500 victims of hate crime, people who have been targeted because of who they are right here in the city of Leicester. This made us Britain's biggest study of hate crime victimisation, because not only did we speak to the most amount of hate crime victims within one study, but we covered the breadth of different victim groups. And on one level, that's great as researchers. You feel happy, this is the biggest study. But on a human level, that's horrific. I was the lead researcher for the project, so I met over 4,000 community members here in Leicester and 1,500 victims and heard firsthand these experiences. And to tell you a bit about that, we found that hate crime was an everyday, unreported, lived reality for many people. And although this was conducted in Leicester, we would say the same is replicated within any multicultural environment up and down the country. So we heard from people who'd been tipped out their wheelchair. We heard from people who'd had feces, fireworks pushed through their door. We heard from people who'd had face veils ripped off, turbans ripped off. We heard from people who'd had their guide dogs kicked, their walking aids taken away. We heard from people who'd been mimicked and mocked because of a speech impediment, because of the way they walked, a physical impairment. We heard from people who'd been befriended and then exploited and then humiliated because of who they were, because of the perceptions we have as people, the prejudices that we have towards people. So why do people do this? Why do people commit hate crimes? We like to think that they're different from the rest of us. We like to think that people who are going to target someone because of who they are, because of their race, because of their religion, because of the way that they look, that they've got to be far-right individuals, hate-fueled people. But actually it's ordinary people who may fear difference, that it is unfamiliar, that they are uncomfortable with that difference. They may see this difference as a threat, something they need to be scared of, something they need to fear. Or they may see this difference as a vulnerability. They may see that individual, based on the way that they looked, on who they are, as an easy target in the eyes of the perpetrator. But these are all factors that form the basis of people's prejudices and that can lead to angry, violent, harrowing expressions of hate. And what impact does this have on people? I'd just like to share some. We heard from people who said that they were upset, angry towards others after being targeted because of who they were. We heard from people who said that as a result of this victimisation, I feel anxious, vulnerable, fearful to do everyday things. We heard from people who said, it's affected my mental health. I now feel depressed. I now have depression. It's affected my physical health. It's made an underlying health condition worse. And from people who try to take their own lives. As you can see here, it's a male with physical disabilities. He's in a wheelchair, and to meet him, the funniest person, very confident in his own home, but now doesn't leave his house because people see him in his wheelchair, make a judgment about him, and target him. They see him as an easy target just because of the way he looks. As this Muslim man said, it makes you feel demoralised, it makes you feel hated, it makes you feel isolated, unwanted, being targeted just because of who you are, something you can't change about yourself. I think this is a really interesting one that we sometimes forget. As this young gay man said, the stuff they're saying about you is the same stuff you have fought for years, to be comfortable in your own skin, to come out and say, this is who I am and I'm happy with it. So sometimes being the victim of a hate crime is the tip of the iceberg. The way we look, who we are, leads to how we feel comfortable, how we feel accepted. So if somebody's picking that out and saying you're different, you're inferior, you're unwanted, then that's going to have a significant impact. And finally, this was just an awful interview with a woman with mental ill health who said you just can't leave it behind you. I look in the mirror now and I see that I must have easy target on my head. I must have different on my head. Because why is it that it keeps happening? People look at me and they target me and abuse me. And now I look in the mirror and I see that. It's research like this as a social scientist that I'm proud of doing. That I've been out there and spoken to real people. But it makes you realise that if you're engaging with the real public, I want to be making sure that it makes a difference. And so for this reason, I just want to say that we produced a findings report, but we also produced a victims manifesto. This embodies the needs and expectations of those whose lives were directly affected by hate crime. So we feel that they're important, they're achievable, that they're victim-centred, and that can make an improvement, if implemented, can make an improvement to the service we give to victims of hate crime. I think no one should have to look in the mirror and see the object of hate. Thank you very much.